All right, hi everyone, and welcome to AI Tools for Research, the sequel, hosted by the OSU-Tulsa Library. I'm Zane Ratcliffe, the instruction librarian here, and Vanessa Greco is joining us in the chat today, our user experience librarian. And if you have any questions, you can drop those in the chat as we go along. This is a sequel or a part two to AI Tools for Research, a workshop that we hosted last fall to kick us off in the arena of generative AI in the academic landscape. Last year, we discussed all the new and popular chatbots and how many people were already using many of these tools on a day-to-day basis. And certainly we're using things like social media or cell phones and things that have AI functionalities and have had AI functionalities for years before Gen AI tools came onto the scene. We talked about how it's become more integrated into tools that didn't previously have AI functionality like Zoom, Canva, Grammarly, and now even our email and search engines like Google that we use every day. And then we acknowledge that things are changing really quickly, but that with all the new developments, there have been tools created that could benefit our research and our studies by potentially helping us save time, map out ideas, and create meaningful connections during the research process. The alternate title to today's workshop is AI Literacy and Research Skills, Balancing Human Expertise with AI Tools in Academic Research. As we've all seen over the last couple of years, Gen AI is changing and updating rapidly. And most, if not all, the tools that we discussed last year are now using newer models. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to revisit the tools and resources that we covered and also expand upon these concepts and dive into the realm of AI literacy, looking at those skills in a way that will remain applicable to your academic journey. Even if or when the AI tool that you choose to use is updated, you won't feel so much like you're out of the loop or falling behind the times. There's also been a lot of discussion around human AI partnerships and agentic AI coming onto the scene. That topic kind of goes beyond the scope of this workshop. This is really more of a getting started. But the discussion of how to balance and prioritize our human expertise as we adapt to having these tools embedded into our environments will be crucial as things continue to advance. And so on the agenda for today, we're going to talk about the tenets of AI literacy and how to work those into your research process. And then we'll get into some of the various AI tools, some chatbots and some others, and then we'll look at examples. And we'll do some hands-on prompting, chat prompting, which will help us create search strings that we can use to search for peer-reviewed literature. And then we'll look at the library databases as well. And we will wrap up the day with exploring options for lit review mapping tools as kind of a fun bonus. But before we get into all that, we have a quick little survey. I have just a few short questions for you here to kind of help us get our brains moving and thinking about our topic today. So if you have your computer or your cell phone in front of you, you can scan this QR code here, or you can visit menti.com and use code 44784667 to access the survey. And then Vanessa kindly dropped that link to the poll directly in the chat. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring that up on the screen. Okay. So the first question here is, in general, how do you feel about AI? I included this question because, I want to say that it's okay if you're not really sure how you feel yet. I see that we have a lot of people who love AI. That's awesome. You can also give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Kind of neutral. Okay, we have some neutral, some who love AI. I think the mixed feelings option is probably where a lot of people are right now, but there are some people who are really digging AI. It's a strange time. Things are changing really quickly, and there's a lot of information out there about what's happening, what's kind of gone wrong, what's gone right, and what to expect next. And it can be really overwhelming, right? I think I've talked to a lot of students who were just like, this is a lot, and I'm overwhelmed, and I don't really know what I'm getting into. And so my hope is that after today, you'll at least have an idea about how to kind of navigate this landscape, even if you remain in a kind of a mixed feelings place. This is cool. I think this is kind of a change from last year. I think last year everyone really was like, oh, I don't like this. This is scary. And we see some people who were like, yeah, this is great. I think we've also made a lot of strides in the last year as things have continued to grow. And so, all right, and I'll take us on to our next question, which is, how often do you feel like you use AI? There are a lot of options here, kind of ranging from all the time, maybe a few times a day, a few times a week, rarely, or not at all, or maybe you're not sure. That's also okay. This question is really about awareness of AI. So the main takeaway I want you to get here is that in general, we do use AI all the time. There are many things that we use it for every day that utilize technologies that fall under the umbrella of artificial intelligence, like our cell phones. I think a lot of students are like, oh, I don't use AI, but then they're on their cell phone or they're in their car, and they're, using Bluetooth technology that uses algorithms and all that. And they just don't always realize it. And so I think sometimes it feels like a choice, but often it's not. And Vox has a really great video on this titled, "We're Already Using AI More Than We Realize," and that's available on our guide that you can watch at your convenience. And then our next question is, how confident do you feel with AI tools? Maybe you do use AI all the time and you feel pretty confident. Maybe you're just getting started. We have kind of a mix here of confident levels, somewhat confident, okay, not very confident. And so again, hopefully by the end of today, if you're so inclined, maybe you will give it a try if you've never tried it before, and maybe you'll be more confident in your ability to use it in a way that aids you with your studies. And then the next question is, what tools have you tried? Okay, cool. This is a fun word. I love word clouds. They're a lot of fun. So if you type in your response here, I see ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, Notebook LM, that's a fun one. Perplexity, SciSpace. Okay, very cool. We see a lot of ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is the most common one just because it was like the first one that rolled out onto the scene. DeepSeek. I actually haven't played much with DeepSeek yet, so very cool, very cool. There are some others. I tend to use Claude. There are also a ton of other options for like image or video generators, and a lot of these now do video and image generation that even if they previously did not. And there are some that are built just for that, but we're not going to cover those today. Today we're just going to be talking about text. And so there are a lot of options here, and then we'll get into even more options as we go forward. And so the last question is, if you've tried AI, what have you found it to be helpful for? So the purpose of this is kind of have you thinking about use cases for Gen AI tools like the chatbots. I see we haven't tried yet. Improve writing and research, writing just certain things, maybe not like whole papers, but maybe helping you, write an outline or something like that. Japanese restaurant menu, I love that. I think it's interesting to see people using it for more fun things, like maybe a restaurant menu versus research things. And maybe after today, you'll kind of think of some use cases that you might find it to be helpful for throughout your studies. And we'll touch on this more later, but many of these chatbots are built on large language models, and they can be helpful for things that involve language, although they can make mistakes. And I think brainstorming ideas, exploring the topics and keywords, maybe finding synonyms, summarizing information. I think people have used it for coding and translation. Those are some common things. And so I'm hoping that our discussion today, starting with AI literacy and moving forward, will give you some confidence and some resources that you can take with you. Okay, moving on past that. So starting off with AI literacy, this is the first segment of our workshop today. So there are a few circulating definitions of AI literacy, and depending on which one you look at, it may break down into 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 elements or frames. The definition that I see most frequently cited is this one from Long and McGurko, and they define it as a set of competencies that enables individuals to critically evaluate AI technologies, communicate and collaborate effectively with AI, and use AI as a tool online, at home, or in the workplace. So many different applications for AI use. And in their conference presentation, they kind of place this within the context of scientific, computational, and digital literacy, and discuss how it overlaps with data literacy and how digital literacy skills are really a necessity for understanding AI and technology literacies. And then they reference questions that people have been asking themselves in the last few years, such as, what is AI? Is it dangerous? How can it help me? Is it objective or subjective? Does it think like I do? Will it take my job? It's a common one. Should I be concerned about my data? And so on. And these questions really signify the importance of AI literacy, and it's helpful to have a definition and kind of a guiding framework. Put more simply, for the purpose of this workshop, I'm defining AI literacy as the ability to understand, evaluate, and use artificial intelligence systems and tools critically and ethically, which means, understanding how AI functions, being able to evaluate its results and limitations, and knowing how to use AI carefully and responsibly in different situations to ensure, safe and intelligent use of the technology. And so I've chosen this definition and I've split it into these 4 frames: comprehension, application, evaluation, and ethics. So we're going to look at each of these 4 frames and apply them to Gen AI within the context of getting started on your research, so that we can then jump into the tools and play around with them and do some hands-on activities. So the first tenet is comprehension. And this is about understanding Gen AI. So the key here in terms of Gen AI is knowing what it is and what it can and cannot do. And so generative AI is trained on massive amounts of data to generate new content in response to human input or prompts, which we'll get into later, and can create things like text, images, code, audio, video, and so on. And many of these are built on large language models or LLMs that create responses by predicting patterns based on their training data. There are models that use LLMs that have other capabilities as well. For example, Perplexity is a search engine that actually utilizes many LLMs at once, including ChatGPT. But for the most part, when you use these tools like Claude or ChatGPT, this is what's happening. The tricky thing is that while Gen AI might seem, like a magical, all-knowing being with capabilities that far exceed our own, it's not. It generates based on patterns, not necessarily retrieval. And even the tools that now can access and retrieve information are not always accurate. And they're certainly not inerrant, just like us, it can make mistakes. And so they're not capable of independent thinking, reasoning, or understanding, nor are they a substitute for human expertise or judgment. And they still, at this point in time, very much require human input and quality control. And so we mentioned in our last workshop that whether AI is really learning or thinking, quote, like a human, is still very much debated within the scientific and the philosophical communities. But I think it's still at this point in time that it's not really thinking in the same way that you and I are thinking. And it's not aware or conscious in the same way that humans are. And so, although it's fun and certainly a great marketing technique for companies to anthropomorphize the tool and say things like agentic AI are up and coming and that they're thinking and learning or deep thinking, we're just not quite to that point yet. And so the bottom line is understanding how Gen AI works can help you use it effectively and also recognize the limitations. And so this I wanted to include, it's just a helpful infographic from AI for Education, which kind of further helps define Gen AI in terms of where it falls in the AI umbrella we mentioned. And this is beyond the scope of the workshop, but I wanted to kind of give you this definition. So you have generative AI here at the bottom within the bubble of deep learning, which is within the bubble of machine learning, which is in the bubble of artificial intelligence in the field of computer science. And for a more in-depth look at this, and for other AI-related definitions, you can look at our AI guide. We have a section on like key terms to know. And so again, emphasizing that artificial intelligence, is a huge field that's been around for quite a while. But when we're talking about these chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude and Perplexity, all these are generative AI tools, and that kind of, it's in the smaller bubble. Okay. Application. This is about using Gen AI effectively in your uses as a student. So generative AI can be a useful thought partner and a tool for organization and productivity. And as far as application in the academic environment is concerned, it can be really useful for brainstorming research topics and refining your research questions, generating key terms, keywords, and Boolean search strings, which we'll do a little bit later for searching in databases, and then getting explanations of complex concepts in simpler terms. Sometimes it does a good job of this, sometimes not. It can still make mistakes. And then organizing ideas and creating outlines. And we'll talk more about prompting later, but it's built to kind of layer upon itself so that you can draft ideas and iterate prompts to get better outputs. And it's good to start with clear, specific prompts that include context, and then iterate using follow-up questions so that you can refine those responses that you get. And a lot of the tool creators will say that it's good to kind of think of it as a conversation, not as a one-time query. So if you think of it like a thought partner or a Socratic partner, or maybe a thought experiment, it can kind of be like a game. And then from there, you can take that experiment, reflect on it, and then use it to go find relevant research articles. So using it strategically for exploration and idea generation, and then building on that foundation with verified sources. I would also add, sometimes it's good to know when to start over. So you don't have to read all of this. This is just a screenshot of an example of a chat that I had with Claude, broken up into two sections here, why it might not be working, and then the advantage to starting fresh. And so I was playing with Claude recently for some help fixing some code, and it broke essentially. And it told me that it would be best to just start all over. And then I said, why? Why is that? And it went on to explain that the code might not be working, citing various things about the rendering and the artifact system getting confused because there were several different versions. I think there were like 12 different versions, and then browser caching. And so it said, here's the advantage of starting fresh, clean slate. And so when I started over with a new prompt, it didn't have those 10 different versions to update. And so then it gave me a much cleaner output. And so it's kind of like taking a piece of paper that you've drawn all over and erased over and over again and throwing it away and starting over with a new slate once you kind of know what you want. And there's nothing wrong with that. I wanted to mention that because sometimes it's helpful and can be part of the research process or the iteration process to start over. But there can also be advantages to maybe saving that prompt, like I saved this prompt, because it taught me where I went wrong in my code, even though I didn't get the correct code or the correct output until I started fresh with the code. And we'll look at some more examples here in a little bit that are more like research related. So moving on to evaluation, this is about thinking critically about the AI outputs. The key here is to always verify information and check your sources, because Gen AI can sound really confident even when it's wrong. And so you want to check for the ABCs here. So accuracy, we know that Gen AI can hallucinate. That term hallucinate meaning really just quite simply just making things up, sometimes creating false information that sounds plausible. And again, some of this has gotten better in the last few years with newer models, but it is still a common problem. So bias as well. We've seen from looking at outputs from different chatbots over time that AI can often reflect the biases that exist in its training data, and then may also favor certain perspectives. And if its training data is inaccurate or biased, then the responses will be less accurate and will reflect those biases as well. So the AI can only be as good as the data it was trained on. And then also checking the currency of the information. A lot of the training data has cutoff dates, and the information you get might be outdated. And even the chatbots that can retrieve real-time info may not always be accurate at first. You might have to ask it to try again. For example, last week, a chatbot told me that ChatGPT only goes up to Model 4 and that Claude was still on 3.5 Sonnet. And I said, wait, those have just been updated as of, I think, August and October, those were updated to the newest version. And so then I asked the chatbot about it. And so it did a new search and it said, oh, you're correct. Those are actually out of date. Let me fix my output. And so, whereas previously it would just say, my cutoff date is January. That's all I can give you, kind of thing. And so it used outdated sources to receive the initial output, which leads me to my last point here about sources. So AI generated content may often lack citations, or it'll use outdated citations, or sometimes just completely fabricate references still. And this is especially important to look out for when you're looking for peer-reviewed articles. So the bottom line here is that Gen AI is a starting point, not an endpoint. You're the researcher, you're the fact checker. And when you're using these tools for academic purposes, you have to make sure you verify, cross-check claims with credible, authoritative sources. And if you need help finding out what the sources are, you can come talk to us at the library and we can help you. And we also have these really cool databases filled with peer-reviewed research. And then this is an example of a ChatGPT conversation I had, just kind of a snippet. Again, you don't have to read the whole thing, but this is kind of an example of why I prefer to use the library databases for research rather than just asking a chatbot. So in this version, in this example, I used the free version of ChatGPT. And I said, hey, I need 5 peer-reviewed articles on social media and youth mental health. And I got some interesting results. And so when I've done this in the past with the free version, using older models, it would essentially just hallucinate a list of completely made up articles with citations that were sometimes just gibberish. But now many of these chatbots have the ability to search the web and grab real articles and results, or blog posts or videos or what have you. But it's tricky because sometimes they do, still hallucinate. And so you have to really read into it. And if you notice this disclaimer at the bottom, ChatGPT can make mistakes. Please check important info. That disclaimer is going to stay there for all the chatbots throughout because it does still make mistakes and they have to admit that. And so it did actually go out and find real articles for me from JAMA and PubMed. And these were all free open source articles, but they were academic articles, which is such a huge upgrade from last year. The weird thing was that 2 of the sources were actually the same article, but they had different dates and different authors in the citation and then they were from 2 different sources. So it's like it went and scanned those 2 different sources and then just grabbed the wrong information from the page. And then the last one there were two more articles in that list, and they had incorrect dates, incorrect authors, and then the citations were off. And then the summaries were also, they didn't actually match. When I went and read the articles, the summaries just didn't quite match what was in the article. Some of the issues here, the dates, authors, citations, summaries. And then since one was duplicated, I would have had to ask for an additional citation. And then there were other issues, like I didn't specify in that question what level of research I needed. So it gave me like a large review of reviews rather than research studies. And if I were to use a database instead, I'd be able to find things that were more relevant, and not just open source articles or links to blogs and articles from around the web. It's also important to note that if I were to enter in the prompt differently, I would get completely different results, right? And then if I were to enter in the same exact prompt today, right now, I would also get probably different results. And then if I were to log in and use a paid version, I would get different results there too. And so to me, this kind of begs the question, am I having to spend more time correcting the chatbot errors than if I were to have just started my search in a source that I knew I could trust and use? And in this case, maybe yes. In other cases, perhaps I could have saved myself some time. And so, but it really just depends on what you're using and how you're using it. Which brings us to our last point here. So using Gen AI responsibly. It is imperative to apply critical thinking and use these tools ethically. Gen AI is a tool, and it can be used to perhaps amplify your thinking, but it's not always reliable, as we've discussed. So there are three main pieces here that I feel like are the most relevant. The first one being academic integrity, and the second one being privacy. So you always want to check OSU policies and your syllabus from your instructor and your class assignments to guide your Gen AI use. I think now professors are becoming a little bit more comfortable with allowing students to use it for their classwork, but they typically will provide parameters for you. And so you always want to cite or disclose AI when it's required when you use it. And there are ways now. Last year, I think a lot of the major citation styles like APA, MLA, Chicago were still kind of developing the parameters, and major publishers were also developing their parameters for what they would accept. But there are ways to cite AI, and so if you need help citing AI, come talk to us and we can help you do that. And then Vanessa just linked to ITLE's page, Leveraging AI Tools Responsibly. And so to review OSU policies, you can go visit that guide and get some student support as well. And I think there's also a page for faculty support. And then this privacy component I really want to emphasize here as well. You still, even with these newer models, you do not want to put your own or anyone else's sensitive or confidential information or their intellectual property, like copyrighted works or student papers, into your prompts. The free versions of these chatbots still largely train on user input, and you often have to opt out of it, training on your input. Like I think a couple months ago, Claude added a setting, or you can go into your settings and say, yes, you can train on my prompts, or no, you can't, kind of thing. And so if you don't want the chatbot training on your sensitive data, you want to make sure you refrain from adding it in there. In other words, do not feed the bots. And then the last point under ethics is just the other concerns, issues, and considerations, some of which we discussed last year. And we don't have time to get into all of these today, but they're still kind of worth having in the back of your mind as you navigate the AI world. And some of these you could possibly, use as research topics later on when we get to that part of the workshop. And so different items here. So effective and ethical AI use requires us to at least be aware of these potential issues. This is not an exhaustive list, but the list has grown a bit in the last 2 years. A lot of conversations around privacy and security, cybersecurity, transparency and access to tools, the biases we discussed, like automation bias, authorship and copyright issues. My colleague Clark at the Stillwater campus is going to be doing a workshop later on the semester about copyright. There's still a lot about the copyright laws that are not in place yet, and so this is still a huge issue to discuss. Reliability of data, misinformation is a big one because of that hallucination factor, environmental impact, and the list goes on. Again, this list has grown, and we may see even more potentials and solutions with time. And in the last year, there really have been some more strides toward transparency and accountability from various companies, and hopefully these trends continue. And again, these are not completely objective tools. They're subject to the biases and everything that their training data that they get from the training data. And so this critical evaluation is non-negotiable. But it's not all bad, right? We're seeing some really good things come out of AI as well, such as AI built to enhance digital accessibility tools. We've seen use cases out of the healthcare world where AI helped with like EKG and CAT scans, imaging in healthcare, AI being built to help maybe figure out some sustainable solutions for environmental issues. And there's actually a global organization called AI for Good that focuses specifically on identifying practical ways to use AI to help benefit humanity and solve global challenges. So the focus here is on harnessing these tools and finding ethical applications, and it is possible. So in summary, it's important to understand what these LLMs and chatbots are good for, what they're not good for, and what they are. I encourage you to make a habit out of verifying every piece of information that comes out of these tools. If you decide you want to use Gen AI tools, practice using them to assist you and to brainstorm rather than ask them to do your work. Remember that you are responsible for the accuracy and for the integrity as a student or a researcher. And Gen AI can assist you with brainstorming and organizing, but it cannot replace your original thinking. Your critical thinking skills, creativity, analysis, and all the other wonderful things that come from our brains cannot be replaced. And so, truly, I think the best research comes from that human curiosity and questioning and, the insight. So emphasis on that. You can use Gen AI as a research assistant, but not a replacement for your scholarship. And so why does it matter? We're all busy people, right? Living in the information age between coursework, work, life responsibilities, and the constant stream of information on our phones and devices, it can be really overwhelming. One of the biggest challenges living in a world with revolutionary technologies like the internet and AI tools is information overload. We're constantly inundated with endless information and sometimes misinformation and just content on a daily basis with very limited time. And so we can possibly use tools like AI to help us maybe save time and work through some of these things, but we have to apply our critical thinking skills so that we can cut through the noise and work more efficiently. So you can leverage AI tools while maintaining your judgment, your creativity, and your ethical standards. The goal isn't to avoid AI, it's just to use it wisely. So that way we can move from chaos to clarity. Chaos to clarity. In terms of research and scholarship, this means being able to find reputable sources, quality articles. So we can now dive into the tools and look at how we can actually utilize them. So this wraps up our first section on AI literacy. We're a short way in. Now's a good time for a stretch break. Speaking of information overload, we're about to move into our next section. And if you're with us live or watching the recording, now's a good time to kind of pause, stretch your legs, take a little walk, and kind of let some of these concepts sink in. Taking short breaks is a great way to combat information overload, and we're covering a lot today. So if you need a break, feel free to take one. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move on to talking about Gen AI tools for research. And we're going to start with this list of the most popular top chatbots. And if you're with us for our last workshop, you'll notice this is the same top 5 list, as these are still the most popular proprietary tools being used right now. And there are many, many, many more out there, but these are probably the ones that we're all seeing the most often right now. And again, for this workshop, we're focusing on textual outputs, not audio, video, etc. Even though now a lot of these tools can produce images and all that, or even like whole documents. So last year we discussed how chatbots are computer programs that simulate conversation with the user. They use large language models to create conversational content. And there are models that can now generate and understand and perform, the various tasks while also searching the web. And all of these chatbots listed here can do all of this to varying degrees, but they've all changed a lot in the last year, and they've all been trained quite differently. So what has changed? All of these tools are now using newer models, and most of these models now include the ability to search the web in addition to their training data. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. It just depends on how you kind of ask the question. You can ask it to maybe think more deeply or to do a search, and then it will come back and add that to its output. And so last year when we did this workshop, ChatGPT, owned by OpenAI, was working with GPT-3, and now we're up to 5. And then Claude, similarly owned by Anthropic, has moved on to Sonnet and Opus 4.5 and 4.1. And these all work very similarly. Perplexity is kind of the interesting odd one out because it utilizes several of these chatbots like ChatGPT in its own design and acts more like a search engine, but with more of a focus on information retrieval rather than conversation. And so we'll get more into that in a bit, but I did want to talk about Copilot really quickly. In case you did not know, students, faculty, and staff at OSU have access to Microsoft Copilot Enterprise. And you can find more about this on the ITLE website. And Vanessa just dropped that in the chat as well. And so on that website, they note that with Enterprise, you have access to commercial data protection, which acts like kind of a bubble that encrypts and protects your data against external threats. And it also gives you more control over your data, so it's not being sold or used to train the model without you explicitly opting into that feature. And then we pay for a more advanced model that's using GPT-4 and 5. They also note the transparency in the model. The chatbot will give you links to the sources it uses, so you can go and verify the accuracy of those sources because it can access the web and search it, which is great. And then because of that, it doesn't have a knowledge cutoff date because it has those online search capabilities. And one benefit to us at OSU is that it's a Microsoft product, right? So it integrates really well with Microsoft Edge, the browser Edge, and then Excel and Word and some of those tools in the suite. It does work really well with other Microsoft products, and it's specifically best to use it with the Edge browser. So this is an option that's available to you as a student or faculty or staff member, and it might be a better option than using a free version of one of these other chatbots since it has that extra layer of data protection. And to get started with that, you can visit copilot.microsoft.com and sign in with your OKey. So again, last year we went into what these chatbots are good for, what they're not so great for, and this is what we had come up with at the time on the right and on the left. So we had said over here on the left, okay, chatbots can be pretty great for brainstorming ideas, exploring topics and keywords, as we talked about, outlining, summarizing info, maybe writing help, like formalizing, fixing grammar, and then translation and speech guidance, and then writing or debugging code. And then we had said over on the right side that they're not great for research, starting your research, finding scholarly articles, medical, legal, financial advice, any high stakes decision making, using it to write your whole paper, or for making art or replicating human creativity. At the time, it just was not good at those things. And I think that most would still agree with several things on this list. Obviously, we talked about for privacy purposes, it's best to just not ask it for anything that's high stakes. But I think that with the updated model, some people would say that it is doing a better job at research or retrieving scholarly articles, or maybe even at making art. And so you're going to see a variety of opinions on this, but you can also form your own judgments as we kind of dive into the tools with some examples to see how they work. And so all of these tools that we talked about can do all of these various things here. You're going to see a lot of opinions on which tool is best for what. Like some might say that Copilot is best for coding, but others might say that Claude does a better job. But all of these tools can, help you brainstorm, generate those terms. They're all trained to explain complex concepts and kind of make them more simple, although some of them don't do that very well. Organizing and outlining ideas, and then providing that summaries and analysis, even like code analysis. Again, that's just some of them and not always very well. It just depends. Notable differences, some like Perplexity will offer those automatic citations, as we saw with Copilot. Some integrate with specific tools like Microsoft and Copilot, like we looked at. And then free and paid versions will have different capabilities based on like what tier you're on and what model you're using. A lot of free versions do still rely on their training data with those cutoff dates, although again, most of these now search the web. And some now offer more advanced features, like what they're calling deep research, which offers more complex outputs as well as citations and document upload features. The note here, though, is really quality. You can find so much online, and often, depending on what you ask and how you ask, the bot will kind of, it'll crawl the web and retrieve information in order to formulate a response. But the source it's working from just may not be a great source necessarily. And that's where we get into some AI tools that are actually built for research. So if you're with us last year, you might recognize some of these names. There's some interesting tools here. So these are more research-based tools, some of which have been around a long time, like Semantic Scholar and OpenAlex, even several years before ChatGPT even came onto the scene. And this is not a comprehensive list, but these are some options that are great starting places as they're tools that were built specifically with academic papers and research in mind. And many of these are built on databases like Semantic Scholar and OpenAlex, or sometimes PubMed. These are larger databases that are full of open access research. And many of these tools do use these as kind of like their underlying databases from which they index and pull information. The benefit to using these tools that are trained for academic research is that they're trained on their source data and that it's only pulled from these academic sources and not just the open web, right? So not like Reddit or YouTube or some other, a blog post kind of thing. And they also have built-in functions that can be useful to the lit review process. And they contain features and built-in functionality like citation tracking to see commonly cited works or find related citations, tools to see which authors cited each other, and tools to suggest other authors or suggest other articles and so on. And we'll look at some of this more later. Some of these tools also have options for visualizing literature, and we'll talk about that when we get into literature mapping. Many of these tools also like consensus, which is kind of bolded here. Now offer a deep research function, and that's designed to generate longer reports or even like whole lit reviews rather than short answers. I highlighted consensus here because I just found out yesterday, actually, that we now have a trial run of consensus through OSU libraries. And you can try that out using your OKey login, just like you can with Copilot. And for more information on this, you can visit the Edmund Lowe Library AI Guide, which gets into how to use consensus. And they're going to be doing some upcoming training on consensus as well. So if you're interested in that, you can visit that. Vanessa just linked to it in the chat. And for those of you here in person, I'll provide all these links again later as well. And there are some limitations to these tools. The most important one being that most of the time when you use these tools, you're only going to find open source academic literature, or you're going to run into literature that's behind a paywall. And that's really where the library comes in and why it's so critical to utilize library resources, because a lot of the quality sources that you run into, if they're behind a paywall, we might have access to them through a subscription through the library, or we can at least request them for you through a really cool service called Interlibrary Loan. And so we'll get into this some more shortly, but I really want to emphasize here that none of these tools, particularly the more popular chatbots, are a replacement for library databases or scholarly sources. These are starting points that can help you explore and refine. You can take those and create those keywords that you find as you're exploring and create search strings, which will make your searches way more effective in databases or online, and that'll lead you to your quality sources, many of which you can find through the library. We've talked about AI literacy components. If you need to stand up, stretch, take a break for a second, feel free to do that. And we talked about some of the various tools available, kind of the popular tools, and then some of these more research-based tools. And so now we're going to talk about prompting, so then we can get into doing some exploring. So we've mentioned prompts several times now. What is a prompt in terms of Gen AI? A prompt is a set of instructions that you can give to an AI tool or a large language model, such as Claude or ChatGPT, or any of the others we've mentioned, to perform a specific task and generate a specific output. And these instructions can range from just a few words to like multiple sentences, or you can be really specific and put several paragraphs. The more detailed and clear and structured your instructions are, the more likely the AI is going to give you a useful and relevant output or an accurate result so that you can have the information you're looking for. So prompting is really a skill that develops with time and practice. Every interaction you have with an AI tool will be different because of your input, the context or the desired output, and then it's going to vary from user to user, right? Or from AI tool to AI tool. But even a tiny change, like a word change or an additional detail, can change the result. So earlier, like my example, I had the wrong code, and then I said, okay, what about this? And then it was like, oh, you might try this, but then, it wasn't aligning. And so it just depends on how it's worded. All of that, every question or request or piece of background information you bring to your prompt is part of your prompt. And so, crafting them in a well-designed way can improve the quality of the output. And later on, we're going to input our query into multiple tools, which gives you varied perspectives, different styles, and different levels of detail so you can kind of compare. And so this framework, the CLEAR framework, there are many different ways to go about prompting and many different frameworks out there. I found that this CLEAR framework is really helpful. It was coined by Dr. Leo Lowe from University of New Mexico Libraries, and it really sums up the main components. And you can apply these across the board no matter what tool you're using. So this stands for concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. So it's about brevity and clarity, being really specific in your prompt, and then keeping things structured and coherent so as to maintain a logical flow of ideas, and then making sure your output specifications are clear and precise as far as like your format, your content, and all that, and your scope, so that you'll have a stronger answer. But then also allowing for flexibility and customization. You can experiment with different ways to phrase or frame an issue and then get a different response. And then the reflective piece, the continuous evaluation, is about being iterative and reflective so that your prompts and outputs will improve. And it's not going to be perfect the first time, and that's okay. Neither is the research process. It's often muddy, complex, and that can be part of the fun of it if you, keep a curious mind. And so be specific about what you need. Help me find 5 keywords for my research topic is better than just inputting, help me with my research. Give context. If you mention your field, maybe your level, such as, I'm writing an undergraduate research paper versus a dissertation, and maybe give it some background information, like what you already know about the topic. And then you can ask for structured output. You can say, I need 5 keywords and 3 search strings, and I need it in this format, rather than just saying, give me keywords. And then iterating and refining, again, your first prompt won't be perfect. You can follow up with, hey, can you make these more specific? Or what about some alternatives? And then this is just another example here. Instead of saying, I need to research climate change, You might say, I'm writing an undergraduate research paper on climate change adaptation strategies in coastal cities. So you give a whole background. And then can you suggest 5 keywords and 3 search strings that I could use in academic databases? And then you might follow up with like, great, what databases might I try this search in? Or what are some related terms and synonyms? And sometimes these bots will just give that to you. They'll say, here's some search strings, try searching in IEEE or, some other database. And so we're almost to the section where we're going to look at examples. So let's talk about search strings really quickly. This is about talking to the database using its language. So what we call Boolean operators in the library world, and, or, and not, these are the keys to combining or excluding keywords in your search and creating an output in the databases that will yield results for you. So and narrows your search by requiring all the terms that you use to be present in the results, or will broaden your search by including results that contain either term, but not necessarily both terms. And then not will exclude specific terms from your results. So for example, I might have large language models and environmental impact if I wanted to explore that piece we talked about earlier, cybersecurity and generative AI, misinformation and social media and algorithms. And these are ways I can break my topic down into shorter relevant terms that the databases can use. And then once we play around with the tools and create our search strings, we'll then navigate to the library databases, which you'll find at our library webpage, tulsa.okstate.edu/library. Thank you, Vanessa, for linking that in the chat. And I think some of you might be on different OSU campuses, and if you are, find your home library and find their website, and that's where you'll be able to find your databases link. Okay, so putting it all together now, what we're going to do is we've talked about various tools and kind of how to get started with prompting and search strings. So now we can select tools and do some searching. So we're going to select a tool, and you can choose from one of the more popular chatbots like Copilot or Claude or something else if you prefer. Remember, we have access to Copilot Enterprise, and so you can log in with your O key if you'd like to play around with that. And then we'll pick a prompt and enter a prompt. So you can ask it for keywords. You can ask it for synonyms or specific search terms. You can ask it about trending topics. Maybe you don't know what topic you want to start with. And if you brought a research topic with you or a topic for a paper, you can use that and kind of see what it comes up with. And then we'll take that prompt that we selected and we'll put that prompt into another tool like Consensus or Elicit, Perplexity, or something else, just a tool of your choice, and kind of compare them. And you might be surprised at what you'll find because some of these do work a little bit differently. So my example that I'll start with, my first prompt, I asked several different chatbots if they could fact check this claim. So I took this claim from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. He wrote in a blog post back in June of this year that the average ChatGPT query uses about 0.34 watt hours and a tiny amount of gallons of water, 0.00085 gallons of water. And so I took this quote from his blog post, which is just available on the open web, and I asked the various chatbots if they could fact check it, just because I was curious. And then, after I asked them about it, my second prompt was great. Excellent. Can you take this topic and break it down into keywords and search terms that I can use to search within library databases so I could find peer-reviewed literature? I put that prompt into several different chatbots and compared them. At this point, we're going to do the hands-on and start the chat prompting and searching. So I'm actually going to stop recording so we can get going with that and we can have some interactivity here as well. Okay, so at this point in the workshop, we paused so that we could look at hands-on chat prompting and searching as a group and look at individual group topics and look at examples in an environment that wasn't recorded. And so what I'm going to do is add in a small segment where I record just my examples that I gave and then go through how to find an article in the library databases and then how to take that article and put it into lit maps. So what we put up on the screen was that activity. So what I recommend is that you do this activity on your own. Select a popular tool like Copilot, maybe using Copilot with your OKey login, and then enter your prompt, and then take that same prompt and compare it to a tool that's built for research, such as Consensus, for which we have that trial, or Perplexity, or something else. And so I kind of left this up on the screen for participants to look at for a minute. And then we looked at topic suggestions, possible subject areas. We have students in a variety of different fields, engineering, education, business, etc. And then maybe some possible topics. We also have a database called Newsbank that has a hot topics feature. And you can use that to explore if you're not sure what you want to write about or what you want to research. Or you can ask the chatbot for a topic idea, taking some of these examples, maybe microplastics in the food chain, or AI and creative writing, and so on, just to find a topic to play around with. And then we looked at examples of how to write those chat prompts that we discussed. So what are some trending topics in the field of blank? I'm interested in blank topic. Can you suggest 5 specific research questions I could explore and provide keywords for each? I'm writing a paper on this topic for my course. Help me narrow down to a focused research question, that kind of thing. And so this was just kind of a way of giving them examples of how to write a prompt. And so before we do that, let me go through and show an example. Okay. So this was my example that I put into Copilot with that fact-checking question that I had. So essentially I took this blog post from the OpenAI CEO, Sam Altman, where he said, this is how much water and watt hours of electricity ChatGPT uses. So I put in my question, and then Copilot said, thanks for sharing that quote. Here's a breakdown of the 2 main claims and what the evidence says. And so you can see here, it gives me this claim, and it says that's mostly true. And here's why. It gives me 2 different links to 2 different sources that I can click on. And then on my own time, I could click on the sources and go and vet them and see if they were good sources. One is a blog post from Tech Times, and then there's another article as well. It gives a summary, and then it notes that, some of these numbers are credible, but that they depend on assumptions and all of that. And then this other claim as well, they said, okay, it's partly true. It notes that it's a visionary projection and not a proven fact. It quotes his blog post again and then says, here's what the current trends show based on a Newsweek article as well as an IDC article. And so, at this point, I would go through and read those and kind of see for myself what they say. It also gives me a fun little summary table. I think it's really cool that these tools can create tables and charts to kind of visualize things for you. And that's when I put my second prompt in that said, excellent, can you take this topic and break it down into keywords and search terms to use to search within library databases? And it said, absolutely, here's how you can break down the topic. And then you can use your search terms in databases such as JSTOR, EBSCOhost, ProQuest, and IEEE Explore. So it gave me some database options to explore without me even asking it, which is interesting. And so it breaks things down into core concepts and keywords, AI and intelligence costs, and some keywords there, data center automation and efficiency, energy consumption, water usage. And you can see how this would be really helpful for you if this was a topic that you were just completely unfamiliar with. If you had a topic that was given to you in a class and you're not familiar, you can maybe ask the chatbot to explore the topic with you, and then you can get some related terms and synonyms, and then you can go look those up. And then it gave me some Boolean operator search strings. So AI and energy consumption, data center automation and AI scalability, generative AI and water usage, that kind of thing. And then it even gave me some suggested subject headings for databases with controlled vocabularies. And so then what I would do is I would take some of these search strings and go to the library databases. I also did the same search in Perplexity, and I asked Perplexity, hi, can you fact check this claim? And then it gave me its own summary. What's interesting is if I changed just a couple of words in this query, it might give me a totally different response. And then I said, again, can you take this topic and break it down into keywords and search terms? And so then it gave me its sources that it used. Some of these were a little bit more scholarly than the other, with the Science Direct link, MIT link. And it broken down into keywords for me. So ChatGPT energy consumption, AI data center, AI water usage. And then it gave me expanded search terms that I could try here as well with those Boolean operators, and then some more advanced search strings. And then it gave me some related articles. And so I did this with several different popular chatbots just to compare what they would say. And then I took them to some of the more research-based tools. And so looking at Consensus operates in a different way. It's going to be searching for relevant research papers first. So when I asked it the same question, it said, we did not find any relevant research paper that's related. Consensus is an AI search engine for scientific research papers. Try reformatting your search to topics likely covered in research papers. You might try searching for, and then it gave me some keywords to try. I changed up my response by asking it a different question. I said, do AI tools use more water and electricity than other technologies? And then it gave me kind of a summary. Yes, these large models consume significantly more water and electricity than traditional technologies. And then it gives me some figures with several sources. I noticed that it gives me quite a few more sources than some of the more popular chatbots. It gives me some key claims and evidence with a chart here, and it cites that as well. And then it has a conclusion. Below at the bottom, it gives me all of the results with all of the articles. that I can go in and read for myself. And all of those are linked below. It also gives me some other options. So I could ask it for a lit review. I could ask it for the consensus meter. I can do a comparison. I have different options that I can do. I can also add in more articles and have it search all of those. I can also ask it to look for research gaps. And I do get 50 deep searches per month with consensus with our trial that we have. And so I can maybe do more of a deep dive where it'll do like an initial survey, go on to do kind of a mini lit review. And so this is just a neat example of some of the options that you have using some of these more research-based bots. But go and play with them for yourself and see there's a lot that you can do. And so at this point, I'm going to pop over to the library databases with some of these search strings. So I've gone to tulsa.okstate.edu/library. And then if I scroll down, I can do my search in our catalog, which will yield a lot of results, including books and things that we have in the catalog. But instead, I want to go to the library databases, and I'm going to do a pretty general search. So I'm going to start with Academic Search Premier, because that covers a wide range of academic subject areas. And then I'm going to put in my search string that I have. And I'm actually going to do a search for large language models and environmental impact and see what I get. I can narrow this down to peer-reviewed using my filters at the top of the page. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to look at this first article that came up here. So reconciling the contrasting narratives on the environmental impact of large language models. And so I'm going to click on that article, and I can access the article. If I click on Access Now, I can look at the full text of the article. If you come across an article that you cannot access for whatever reason, you can always request access to it through interlibrary loan. So I could use this article as a seed article, and the best way I can do that is by grabbing the DOI or the title information from the article. This page would have all the information I would need about the article. And I'm going to grab this DOI, and I can go search for it in something like lit maps. So let me pause really quickly. So at this point, moving on to talking about literature review mapping tools. So once you find an article that you really like in the library databases or online, you can use that to be your seed article that you can use to start a literature search using different literature review mapping tools. And these tools are really great because they can create neat visualizations for you. There are several options. Some are free, some are kind of freemium that have free with paid versions. One that I really like is Research Rabbit, and I also like Lit Maps. For the sake of time today, I'm just going to show Lit Maps quickly. So Lit Maps is a really cool tool. I'm going to go ahead and click this, and it will bring me to this page. I can choose to log in, or I can go ahead and start a search with my DOI. So I grabbed the DOI from the article that I was interested in. So I've gone ahead and signed in so that I can make a lit map that I can save. So I'm going to enter in that DOI, and then I see that I have my article here with 34 references and 16 citations. I'm going to add it to a lit map, and I'm going to make a new lit map, and I'll just call this AI lit map. And then it creates a lit map, and it says, would you like to go ahead and open it? Yes, I'd like to see what it looks like. And it just has my one seed article here in the corner here. And then I can use this to find related literature. Maybe I want to look at the references here and say, okay, so here are some references and things that were related to this paper. And it gives me a chart here that shows going this way. These are things that have been more recently published. And then going up, these are things that have the most citations. So I can click on these articles as these little dots on this map and it'll show me what they are. And I can say, okay, so this one, aligning AI with climate change mitigation, that's something I'm interested in, so I want to go ahead and add it to my map. And then I can expand my map as I go on. I can find other DOIs and add it to this map, and then continue to kind of grow my map so that I can see more connections. If I click this Explore Related Articles, it will, take this map I've already looked at, and it will go through and search for other citations that are related. So then my map just grew. Now I have other articles that I can look at, Green AI, Chasing Carbon, and so on. So this is really interesting. It's a really neat tool. You can use this tool to look at references, to look at citations and authors and make comparisons. And you can do that with some of these other tools as well. And you can click on any of these and get more information. You have the summary, you can add tags and kind of create your own workspace. You can also integrate lit maps and Research Rabbit and some of these other tools with Zotero. so that you can sync your citations and create bibliographies and all of that. And so it's a neat tool. I would recommend playing with that one, as well as Research Rabbit, Connected Papers, and Insightful, because these tools are built on open source databases that have scholarly literature, and they can really help you make connections to different authors and all of that. And so it's pretty neat, especially if you have a seed paper that you're working from, or if you have a list of citations you're working from. I recommend going and playing with that when you have time. Okay, so we are getting to where we can wrap up here and then take some questions. I want to just end with some kind of key takeaways. We talked about a lot of things today. Gen AI is a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement. It is still a tool, using it to explore and brainstorm and organize. But your thinking is what drives the research process. And remembering to always verify and fact check. AI can hallucinate and provide outdated information. Remember to verify and cross-reference with credible sources. And I think it's really valuable to use these in conjunction with library databases instead of as a replacement for them, because there's so much that you can find. I know we didn't have too much time to kind of dive in, but we can always do that one-on-one later with a research appointment, or go play on your own. And if you have trouble finding things, you can let us know. We can definitely help you. The critical evaluation is essential. Make sure you question and look at all outputs, check for accuracy and assess for bias, like we talked about. And remember that you're responsible for the integrity and quality of your work. And then remember to follow OSU guidelines for academic integrity and cite and disclose. And then remember that AI can assist you, but your brain cannot be replaced. It's really about using AI wisely and thinking critically and letting your curiosity kind of lead you. And then lastly, I just want to close with saying, to be a good researcher, you don't need generative AI. It's a great tool, but you don't need it. I've met with a lot of students who have said like, hey, I'm really intimidated by this. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or intimidated, you don't have to use these tools. Your traditional research skills are still very fundamental and valuable. And I think we've been hearing a lot of this idea that people must use AI, or that they're going to fall behind if they don't use AI. But it's one of many tools, and it offers assistance that's really optional. And it should be your choice. Use it if you feel like it's going to help you work more efficiently and more effectively, and choose maybe the tool or the tools that work for you. But your research skills are skills that you build, and you do that by reflecting on what you're asking these tools. You can ask things like, did the AI suggest terms or anything that might seem off base? How am I going to verify these sources? And then would I use this tool again? And then thinking about things you've learned that you might apply to your next research project. That does conclude our workshop for today. I wanted to highlight some of these other workshops that are coming up. Data Bytes through OSU Stillwater. And so if you go to the link that Vanessa just dropped in the chat to the Data Bytes workshops, there are some coming up. I think some of these are in person, but some are online. And then also the online training offered for Consensus. If you're interested in learning how to use Consensus and exploring it, they will be offering, I believe, online workshops on November 4th and 12/1, December 1st. And then again, if you visit this library guide through OSU Stillwater, they have a link to that as well. So you can check that out, get more information. And then this is just a link to our AI survey. Feel free to take the survey if you want. This kind of helps us understand how you like to use AI tools to support your research and your academic endeavors. And then thank you so much for attending. You can feel free to email me if you have any questions, or you can visit the library and submit a question. And then that's just another link to this research guide. You can make an appointment here with us as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and see if we have any final questions. Thank you for watching this video on AI tools for research. Check out our YouTube channel for more tutorials on searching and using library resources.